I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
I'm actually super excited today, Hannah, because
Yeah, I can tell by the shirt.
we have, yes, I'm wearing my Grateful Dead tribute shirt, May 8th, 1977, the greatest show ever recorded, a lot of people would say, at Barton Hall in Cornell. Or maybe it wasn't recorded. Maybe it was a CIA mind experiment. But anyway, I still listen to that concert over and over and over, like 35 years later since I started listening to Dead. And I hope that you at some point get a chance to listen to the Dead in Cornell.
I think that I did. I spent a weekend listening to random Grateful Dead songs, but in your honor,
I don't think it was.
It didn't take. It really didn't take. But I need to try again.
I think you would, if you listen to this record,
Okay.
and especially
All right.
on a road trip,
From start to finish.
yeah,
Just
then
power
you
through.
would become a Dead fan.
Okay.
By the way, why were we talking about the Dixie Chicks? Why were we?
I don't know. You mentioned you were singing Wide Open Spaces.
Yeah,
actually,
because
we
I'm
were
so
talking-
happy to be back in America.
Yes.
That's why. So I spent last
Yes.
week in Spain, and obviously I love Spain. My wife is from Spain. My kids are half Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
The food is delicious. Prices are reasonable. I mean, I got my daughter her first
Jealous.
ever mani-pedi, and it was
Oh.
20 euros.
Good for her.
Anyway, I love Spain, but the parking spaces are so small that I had a Peugeot 5008, which is like a little sort of minivan SUV combo.
But a manual, I'm guessing.
Yes, and
Yeah.
thankfully that was an option. Thank you,
Yeah.
Sixt. The rental car company lets
I've
you
done
choose.
Sixt in Europe. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
And frankly, I really liked the car. I got it because I have two girls in rear-facing car seats in the back, and I knew we would be transporting beach gear and luggage. And, it's not fast, but it was pretty intuitive, and I thought it was good.
But the door space is
So
an
this is
issue.
my problem, not with the
Yes.
Peugeot, but with Spain. And the parking spaces are so tight that when you pull up to your local Carrefour or whatever it's called, and you pull into a space in between two cars, you cannot, or at least I can't, and I'm not that fat, open my door with enough space to get in and out without brushing my whole body on the
Yeah, and then
outside
you
of the
get a bit
car,
dirty.
and I get dirty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then try taking a baby in a car seat out of that small. It's just impossible. You take everything out of the car before you park, then park
Yeah.
it, squeeze out. It's what are they thinking?
I don't know. Conserve space.
So in the
Well,
U.S. here, at least in Scarsdale, we have big parking spaces.
I have to imagine when they made those parking spots, the cars were a lot smaller.
That's what.
right?
Yeah, my wife says that.
Same with the roads.
Yep.
You know?
I'm sure they have fantastic roads in Spain.
Oh, this is why every automaker launch for the past 2 years has been there.
They're
They
amazing.
are really nice.
I don't
They're
know if
fun.
it's because of like the socialist government. They need to give people jobs. So they keep building the roads.
The roads are great.
Very
Did you get
good.
stuck behind like big trucks and stuff or no?
No.
See, that's great because I feel like that happens sometimes in like Germany and Switzerland and stuff, but I never had that in Spain.
Yeah.
either.
No. I had a lot of. There are some roads that are limited for like environmental reasons, and
Mm-hmm.
like we were talking about before, they track you when you enter
Yes.
and then when you leave and take your
Yes.
average and give you a ticket. So I don't know
Have
how
to
many
beat
tickets I
that.
got yet, but probably many.
find out.
Anyway, let's talk about a slightly higher end car. I want to talk about a range here. I loved
Okay.
the Peugeot. I don't know that much about it, but it was satisfying. But I want to talk about a few. The Aston Martin has a new Vanquish out. I have
Yeah.
actually seen it, and I took a 12-year-old friend with me. They gave us a sneak preview
A
here.
12-year-old friend?
I took my boss's son to see,
Wow.
like the deputy editor-in-chief at Bloomberg. His son was in the office as I was going off
major
to the
points.
Aston Martin sneak preview, and I was like, hey, is your kid bored? I'll take him to the new Aston Martin sneak preview. And the kid was thrilled.
I bet he was.
And he was quite good at sticking through the whole presentation without whining, asking good questions.
He asked questions.
Yeah, he did.
Wow, impressive.
And but anyway, I just saw it, and they
Okay.
walked us through it, and it was, I thought, beautiful.
Did it look markedly, I mean, I've seen photos, of course. Did it look markedly different than previous Aston Martins of any variety?
Not
I mean, if
really.
you see it on the street, are you going to know instantly?
Yes.
This is the Vanquish.
Straight away, you're going to know.
Okay.
But not only will you know it's an Aston Martin, but you'll know it is the flagship model.
But will you know it's the Vanquish specifically?
Can
you tell it?
If you know enough about Aston Martins, yes, you'll know that.
Okay.
Or you'll think it's like what a DB12 should be.
Sure.
I think it's amazing that they're still keeping the 12-cylinder. It is
Thank
to be
God.
lauded.
Yeah.
I spoke with Lawrence Stroll, of course, the owner and chairman of Aston Martin, a few months ago, and he said if they want to, they could even put a manual transmission in this thing, which I don't know.
Now, what was he implying? Is he hinting that they're going to?
No, he was saying, like, we asked why not, and you and I have gotten great answers, I think.
Yes.
The best being from Mark Royce, who kind of admitted, look, it's a cost issue. Like,
yes,
homologating.
I like that. He was honest about it.
Yes, he was straightforward. And
Yeah.
Stroll, maybe, I don't know how incredibly hands-on he is in terms of those things, but what Lawrence Stroll wants, Lawrence Stroll typically gets, right? So if he decides, he was telling us, that he wants or that customers demand it and they'll buy enough, a manual in this or in the Vantage, which you drove in Spain, then they can do it. Now, I don't foresee that happening, but that's just what he said.
You know, that's interesting because I think if they put it in, obviously it would sell right now. And it's interesting because I've been asking the same questions even during Pebble Beach with Ferrari executives. And I asked the same thing, could you? And they said, yeah, we could. And people would buy it and we'd make money, but we are deciding not to do that.
That sounds like a cop-out.
It was a deliberate decision. They also said their take rate on the California manual was 0.01%.
But that's a California. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to judge anybody. but
here we go.
You don't buy the California if you're really a car person, do you? The California is a car that you want to buy so that other people know that you're wealthy.
Yeah.
That's not a car that you buy because you love cars.
Well, maybe.
Is that fair?
I don't know.
The reason I say this is because I've spent so much time on YouTube. I'd love to have a Ferrari, and I don't have enough money to buy a new Ferrari. So I look at every possible affordable way to get a Ferrari.
That comes up on the market.
So I've spent a lot of time listening to Matt Farah talk about, is the California a car that you'd want to buy? And I think Matt and Zach say, no way, Jose. Like, it's a very bad car.
Well, I would get information from more than one blogger.
Yes, of course
source.
I do. No,
And I don't think it's a very bad car at all. I think entry-level cars are often disdained. The California is not my favorite Ferrari, but it's not a bad car. And just because it's entry-level doesn't mean that people who really are passionate about their cars might buy one.
Well,
That's all I would say.
I mean, the argument I've heard, not just from Smoking Tire, but also from Hoovie's Garage Mechanic, and I watch everything on YouTube, right? Is that the quality control is so bad, and
where
on the California, and I've heard it's a very different story on what do they call the Roma, right? Because that's a car I would take in a heartbeat. It's so beautiful.
The Roma was my favorite car of the year when I drove it.
Yeah,
it was fabulous.
But is that not the entry level currently?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I think
that's exactly what
I don't
I'm saying.
disdain the entry level.
It's a fabulous car, and I think real car people will understand that car is directly related to previous Ferraris from history, and is absolutely within the Ferrari DNA and lineage. And I have a friend who just got one and loves it. So I just would think that that's a little bit of arrogance to just say that just because it's the entry level, it isn't good.
What I'm saying is that's an entry level car that I would love to have and take in a heartbeat. I think the California is different.
The California wasn't my favorite Ferrari.
I don't
either.
think it's as good.
The Roma is much improved.
Anyway, we were talking about the point of this is manufacturers always say the take rate would be low. And I get that on a California, the take rate would be low.
Yes.
But I'm here to say that after what we've seen through the pandemic, and when you look at collector prices now, a lot more people are paying attention now than they were pre-pandemic to collector car prices. And so now if you offer a luxury or exotic or an exclusive vehicle with a manual option, now people know, take the manual. Because especially a car that you're going to, those people are not going to drive these cars, right? They put them in a garage, they hold on to them, and then they sell them.
Again, I have to disagree. I think a lot of people are buying manuals to drive them. And in fact, in the current issue of Business Week, I've got a story specifically about manuals. The younger people who are buying manuals, especially in like Lamborghini and Ferrari range, they're driving them because they want to show off. It's like a status.
For sure. I think I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that now there's a much stronger argument for an automaker to put out a manual.
Well, 10
years ago when I asked, I was in Detroit with Sergio Marchioni and, 100 journalists or 200 journalists. And
so just a private affair.
Exactly.
A private one-on-one.
And they had introduced this little sports car that's gorgeous. It's a tiny little Spider. But they didn't put it out with a manual. And I said, why not? And he said, because you and I would be the only people who would buy one.
That's what they all say.
But I think that's no longer the case. And I think that because, we've all seen what happens to manuals. My brother's desperately searching for a Ferrari. He only wants a manual. And of course
it's not that hard.
Keeps finding the autos that are cheaper. Like at $355, the auto you could get, a 360, the auto you can get. But if you want the manual, you got to pay up for it. Yeah. And so these people are realizing that, and when they have enough money to buy a new car, they're going to say, you know what, the take rate is going to be higher on the manual now.
I like this as a working theory. I will totally subscribe to it.
The 4C, by the way, the Alfa Romeo 4C is what I'm talking about.
I remember it. Okay, good to know.
It's so cool.
With the Fiat 500s, like the ones that are manuals. In fact, my dentist bought one. He's a Ferrari owner and lover and has owned a bunch of Ferraris for years. He lives in Pasadena. But what he drives every day and what he cornered me while I'm in the chair with my mouth open for 30 minutes was to talk about his manual Fiat 500 that he loves. He's obsessed with it.
All right, so the Aston Martin doesn't have, and I don't think on this kind of the new Vanquish, which is their flagship, touring car, I don't think you maybe even want a manual.
No, but of course the Velour. You can get a manual, right?
Yes.
The Aston Martin Velour.
I mean, I didn't even know about that until recently, but that's a hot-looking car.
That car, I mean, no one has ever said that Aston Martin makes bad-looking cars. They look great.
And they also keep putting out these kind of like limited editions with 12-cylinder engines and manual transmissions that I don't find out about until like months after the fact, or in the case of the Velour, like a year later. But so this one, though, I think looks very factory. It looks, I mean, it's so elegant.
What do you think of the panoramic glass roof?
Very cool. And it has the technology that the Range Rover has, where you can kind of like electronically close it, essentially.
Which is important because I've been in other cars and, a glass roof sounds great in theory, but they really become greenhouse.
It's hot. Also, like me,
you got to be careful.
You've, in a very manly way, lost your hair, then you can't
skin cancer.
Risk it. But
I mean, I'm curious how many they're going to sell. They say they're going to limit production to under 1,000, but they wouldn't actually quote me a number. So it seems a little open-ended.
My big thing with Aston Martin is, I mean, I love a lot of the vehicles, like the Vantage. I loved the old Vantage. I know you didn't really totally fall head over heels in love with the new Vantage, but I feel like I would.
It's a tough segment because there are a lot of great cars in that segment.
True.
That to me is the thing.
But my thing with Aston Martin is, do you want to buy the stock? Is this a company that's going to last? Because if you do the comparison of if they could make Ferrari size margins, their market cap should be way bigger. And I know that's not what this show is typically about. But for me, this is the most interesting thing about this company right now. Of course, the history and the vehicles and the new one they're coming out with is drop dead gorgeous and has amazing feats of engineering and design. and I'm sure I will want one, and I already do. But for me, the interesting thing is, do I want the stock? Because if they achieve what Stroll has set out to achieve, and this is a big question on Wall Street, will he walk away or will he stick there and make it a winner? It should be worth a heck of a lot more than it is now.
Look, it's going to be really, there's lots happening at Aston Martin. It'll be really interesting to follow because your question about the stock, they brought in Adrian Hallmark, the former CEO at Bentley, who is very well respected, very well liked. He's really a gentleman and very critical thinker, and kind of known for his ability to withstand a crisis. He was at the helm of Bentley during COVID, and Bentley actually won some awards in the UK for how they managed the COVID, the pandemic, the closures, the shutdowns, and then coming back. And that was really credited to Adrian's foresight. And I think one of the reasons why he's been brought over to Aston Martin is for that same reason. He, if anyone can bring Aston Martin back, quote unquote, it might be Adrian Hallmark. The thing is, and from what I'm hearing, it'll be curious to see whether Stroll really allows Adrian to run the company.
Of course. When you have a billionaire owner.
Yes. How involved does he get? And of course, you hire someone to do a job. Are you going to let them do the job? I don't know. And then on the other side of that, we've got, Formula One, where I feel like Aston Martin for years lived off the reputation that it got as James Bond's car. And now I feel like the Formula One cachet might be surpassing that. And if they actually do sign Adrian Newey, the veteran engineer that is leaving Red Bull, which everyone is saying is going to be announced in the next few days, that will be a major coup. And
probably by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be
exactly. And remember when we spoke with Zach Brown at McLaren, and McLaren, by the way, is really moving up. I mean, Zach Brown is looking really smart. But remember when he said he was getting a lot of resumes from Aston Martin?
Yep.
I just think
that would turn around in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's so interesting. The story of the two Adrians essentially resurrecting Aston Martin would be amazing. Just to give our listeners the stats, because I'm looking at your story. You have a story out on the new V12 Vanquish. 835 horsepower or PS, whatever Pferdestärke translates to.
I never really get that conversion.
823 horsepower, 835 PS. 1,000 Newton meters of torque, so 737 pound-feet of torque out of a 5.2-liter twin-turbo V12. I can't wait to drive. If I get a chance to drive it, and likely you will before I do, but if I get a chance to drive it, I'll be excited. By the way, Barry Ritholtz just walked in the studio.
Barry, Baza.
You may know him from his very successful podcast, Masters in Business.
I think it's the most successful podcast.
It is, I think.
Bloomberg.
It is.
Which is really a feat.
It's the oldest one, at the very least.
Oh, well, that counts for something.
First one.
It's also one. I mean, I listen to it a lot. And frankly, in my day job, I get a lot of my intel from just listening to Barry's podcast tonight while I'm making dinner.
I do get some good guests.
Yes, you do. But he's also obviously a car collector. He's been on this podcast before. And we're going to talk to him in a bit about
a check-in.
A
check-up.
A car that he has customized in a way that a lot of people would consider heresy.
Blasphemy.
But first, I want to get
sacrilege.
Your take. We've been talking about Aston Martin. And
God, that new Aston is just the most gorgeous car I've ever seen.
This is what Hannah's just written about, the new Vanquish.
Is it not just spectacular?
Yeah.
It's so beefy. It's so muscular. It's like everything I've loved about Aston Martin and then some.
And you loved the Vantage. I remember when the new Vantage first came out.
The V8.
And you said, man, that's the most beautiful Aston Martin I've seen in years.
The F-Type Jaguar and that Vantage have very similar family lineage. There was some, at one point in time, they were both owned by Ford. That redesign happened around the same time. But, I feel like the designers have been the same, right, Hannah? One of the Callums.
Ian has been gone for a few years now, and he actually started his own consulting company.
But
called Callum Engineering.
But his pen is still visible in
for sure.
the designs of today, right?
Sure.
And
listen, that F-Type, the coupe especially, it's every time I see it, it's not there's not a lot of them around. There's a handful that with a stick, but you can only get the stick with the V6, not the V8.
Dude, why don't you have one? Why do you not
My
have...
wife wants one. We were shopping one. I am trying to build a garage because I am out of space.
But
I would
you
have
so
more
many
cars.
cool cars. You have a C2 Corvette, and you have an R8, and you have a number of BMWs and
An
Porsches.
M6, right. It's a letter and a number. That's all I do is.
But why,
if a car has a letter and a number,
as
I'm
long as
interested.
I've
No
known
Ferraris.
you've loved the F-Type and the Vantage, and you just never
They're
pulled the trigger.
Well,
What about a DB9? I could see you in get a sort of a 2007, 2008 era.
my M6 scratches the itch for a big, heavy GT with a stick shift, 600 horsepower, and a convertible top. By the way, that was the first quote-unquote nice car I bought. And even that, I couldn't pay retail. I had to buy it off lease, and my wife and I flew out to Indiana, test drove it, signed the papers. It was 3 years old. It was half of new, and then drove home that from Indiana.
Amazing.
I mean,
We applaud that.
Yeah,
to me, this Aston Martin is spectacular, but so is the price tag, and it's a little. Those of us who can't just write endless checks,
it is expensive.
$429 is a lot of wood.
You know what? We should talk about that because I think in my story I mentioned that Aston Martin prices are 4 times that of BMW and twice that of Porsche.
Insane.
And they're doing that on purpose. They're trying to, like you said, Matt, increase their margins. But that you're right, Barry. That is pretty expensive.
Right.
So the car's got to follow it up.
If I'm spending $429, it's going to be on an 812 GTS from Ferrari with the retractable top. Not that I'm anywhere on their list where I would get one.
But that's what I keep saying about Aston Martin. They have some great cars, great options, very good looking. We all know this. But my thing has been, in the segments that they're in, there are so many other options for the same price or about the same price.
Right. And if I'm going to get a front-engine V12, you could do a lot worse than an 812 with a retractable top.
I love the 812.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yes.
But it has the classic tail lights on each side, which other cars like the F12 don't have. And even some of the, I don't remember if it's the 458 or the 488, you need those twin taillights. It just reminds me of the Ferraris that I was a fan of as a kid. Once they went to one light, it's like, wait, I'm spending $250,000 and I only get one taillight on each side? That doesn't seem right.
I had coffee yesterday with a dentist who lives in Beverly Hills.
Wait, the same dentist? Or a different dentist?
This is a different dentist. This is a Beverly Hills. This one's a woman. She owns a 812 Superfast.
Oh,
and she tracks it out at Thermal. And she's done the gumball rally in it, and I heard got a very nice speeding ticket in it. Did not get sent to prison.
Right.
And loves that car. She was telling me about it.
It's so
yesterday.
good looking too.
How would you not love that car?
It's going to age incredible.
I don't know if I would track that. I mean, if you want to track a Ferrari, go mid-engine. This is truly a GT. I don't care if it's 800 plus
track
horsepower.
What you got.
I would never track.
That's what you got.
If I have an 812 Superfast, I'm buying a used Caterham.
I was going to say, everybody who has
Get a
a
Miata.
Superfast has a track car, and it's up by Monticello, where it's on the grounds waiting for you. I don't swim in those waters, and that dash is spectacular also.
So by the way, this you mentioned in your story, $429,000 for this Aston Martin.
That's estimated.
So even if it's around there, like 450, 500,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can really compare it with a new Ferrari flagship because you can't get one.
That's what I'm saying.
Right? You can actually walk in
Right.
to an Aston Martin dealership and actually custom order exactly what you want without having to first buy a Vantage.
A million others.
And exactly. So that automatically makes this so much cheaper. When I bought my Chevy truck a couple of years ago, it was, I think, $68,000. But since it was at the tail end of the pandemic, they had a used one on the lot with 10,000 miles, and it was going for $75,000.
Right.
And the reason is someone who wants it now is willing to pay more.
That's right.
To walk away with it. And all right, let's move on to, I'll say that you can go to Bloomberg.com and read Hannah's story. By the way, you can also shoot us an email with your thoughts on
let us know.
Aston Martin.
Which would you buy?
Well, not only which would you buy, but I'm really interested in the company story. Do you believe in this? If you're a stock investor, and Barry always says, like, you would have been much better off, rather than buying an iPad when they first came out, taking that money and buying Apple stock, right? Don't you say that, Barry?
Say that again?
You're like texting right now.
I'm just shutting my phone off. Look at this. I just came out of the studio and my phone is lighting up. I'm who is pinging me nonstop all day?
You have always said, if you like the iPad,
right?
But you'd be much better off not buying the iPad, taking that $1,000 and buying Apple stock.
I don't know if I've said I would say you'd be better off.
Who said that, or was it you?
No, someone about 10 years ago created a list of every Apple product that has ever come out and said, if instead of buying this product, you bought Apple stock, here's what it would have been worth. So the Mac Classic that I had in 1988, that would be worth like $3 million if instead of the computer I used in grad school, that $2,000 is worth millions of dollars today. It's kind of bonkers.
So I'm just saying, if people email us at hotpursuit@bloomberg.net, I want to get people's take on the Aston Martin stock, which is something we don't normally talk about in the show. But
it's valid, though.
I think it's interesting because of the fact that back in 2018, it was going for 4,000. This is in pence on the London Stock Exchange. Now it's going for 150. 150, it was going for 4,000.
Down 90%.
Dude, if you like this company, if you liked it then, you better love it now. And especially if they bring in these two new Adrians from Bentley and from Red Bull. If those guys are successful and Lawrence Stroll manages to let them resurrect the company, you could be off to the races.
You could be. I mean, buy low, right?
Exactly. I don't suppose you've given any thought to Aston Martin as an investment.
I could tell you, I love Bill Ackman's joke about what's a stock that's down 90%. It's a stock that was down 80% and got cut in half. And I just think that's a genius way of looking at the math.
But then you never make any money buying low.
That's true.
Okay.
It could be a value play, is what I'm saying, right? Because imagine if this had Ferrari valuations.
What's the market cap? $175 million?
It is 1.25 billion pounds.
How many cars do they have to sell to do what and at what profit margin to catch up to what the stock symbol race
Joel
is
Levington.
doing?
Yes.
Michael Dean.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I mean, it's not just, hey, it's the stock. Just because it was higher before and lower now doesn't mean,
I just think it's interesting. And
by the way, I have no opinion on Aston Martin. It could go up or down.
Neither
I'm
do I.
I'm just saying, you have to really look into what's going to happen.
I just think Lawrence Stroll is a smart guy. He didn't get to be a billionaire by accident. And when he does the back of the napkin math on this, he's very convincing.
How did he get to be a billionaire?
I think he's a fashion mogul.
Fashion.
All right, so he's looking at automobiles as an extension of
It's luxury. It's a luxury play.
I got you. Not a terrible move. It's kind of interesting.
He was the guy. He's Canadian. He was the guy behind like Tommy Hilfiger, Michael Kors. He sort of financed those guys back in the day. I think he also might have even financed some of Ralph Lauren, too. But the other thing
who has a spectacular automobile collection.
I know. I'd love to get in there.
I had an opportunity about 10 years ago to go up to Connecticut with a friend who was appraising it. And I'm like, I'll get up there. And I just I missed that opportunity.
Oh, no.
And it kills me because I could have,
Yeah. I would say about the Aston Martin versus Ferrari thing, yes, Matt, I really love your point about you can actually get an Aston Martin, but I think on the flip side, people are also looking at what am I going to get for it when I sell?
True.
And
of course, the
Ferraris
depreciation is a huge...
There's no comparison. I mean, Ferraris just hold their value or go up.
Well, that's why you wait.
Isn't there yet.
You wait for some Bitcoin millionaire to pick one up and then go bust and buy it from her or him a year later. I want to get to Barry's Porsche. He was telling me and some of the other car fanatics in the office. He has been for months, and you've been writing about it on your blog, right?
Yeah, I've been doing regular updates. So,
but tell us the genesis of this story. It's a 911 from what, the 80s?
Yeah. So during right before the pandemic, me and a buddy were rebuilding a pair of FJ40 Toyotas in Colombia, and bring him back to the United States. And it was
As
so
one
much
does.
fun doing that. Then I'm like, let me do that with a Porsche. And Bloomberg had done a story on Moment Motors in Austin, Texas, and they were one of the early companies doing these EV conversions of classic cars. They were mostly doing some trucks. They were doing some Range Rovers and some like Ford Broncos, turning them into EVs. And so I'm like, let me try that. And so I found an old 1988 911 Cabrio that I thought would be a great electric car. The previous owner had raced it. It had racing harnesses and a roll bar, and he had all like racing suspension, and went for relatively cheap as a donor car. And I bring it to my local Porsche guy, works one in Seacliff, and he's like, congratulations, this is a matching numbers M491. I know you said you wanted to tweak it, but it's worth double what you paid for it. I don't suggest this is the car you destroy. So I restored that back to stock. It's just one of these classic analog. It's funny. The only thing I left that the previous owner had done is he had taken the 3.2 into 3.4 liters, the flat six, and it's about 275 horsepower. It's amazing. By the way, the M491 is called the Turbo Package. It's everything the Turbo gives you. The fender flares, the whale tail, the upgraded suspension, the upgraded brakes, minus the blower. It doesn't have a turbo. It's just stock engine power.
Good.
So you're right. So it's not a widowmaker. It doesn't have that tendency to surprise you mid-turn. But I thought my wife would love that car. She's like, it's loud, it smells. She drives a stick. She's like, this is not my favorite car of yours. So I'm like, all right, now I got to do this again. So I start hunting for a new donor car. And by the way, with Moment Motors, I gave them a deposit like 3 years ago. Is a year queue is like a year and change to come up.
How much was the deposit?
$10,000. That's all it was. The deposit.
I mean, that's a pretty steep deposit.
Of course, I want to ask how much you're into this.
I could have walked into a local Porsche dealer and bought a brand new 911S for about what this ended up costing. And then where I live on the North Shore of Long Island, it would be one of the 10,000 911s driving around. Instead, I found
You still also would have to wait.
Back then when,
I mean, now for a Carrera S, I think you're still waiting a year.
When this project began in like 21, 22, it wasn't quite as crazy.
Right.
It was working its way up the automobile line. It hadn't quite, like it was just at the...
So you mean a 911S at 2022 prices or
in
at
2022?
Because the prices now have also gone up substantially.
At 2022 prices in 2022. So I found this like really good looking lagoon green metallic, which is really a light blue, 300,000 mile 911. So really
300,000 miles.
300,000. By the way, the difference between Ferrari owners and Porsche owners: Ferrari owners love to talk about how little miles they have. Porsche owners are absolutely proud. I got 250,000. I got 300,000 miles. It's very 100,000 mile Porsches are just getting warmed up. 100,000 mile Ferraris, I don't know if they even
Hannah,
exist.
I think you can very easily attest to the truth of that
course.
on the Porsche.
I mean,
don't you guys have a? Didn't you pick up a?
We bought a 997 with 80,000 miles.
Nothing.
Sorry,
180,000.
Alright.
180,000.
So-
For
so-
pennies on the dollar.
And it still is a great car, right? I mean, it's.
Oh yeah, we drove that to Utah in a day and fell in love with it.
Right.
That was the
It's
clincher.
this. I was actually so this car, I was looking at a 997.2, the last of the 911, and I'm not a Porsche guy. That's the funny thing. The last of the 911 turbos with a stick. I want to say 2013, 2014.
It's 2013, 2012, 2013, and it's also the last, I think, with hydraulic steering.
So it was white over black with red trim, red seat belts, red stitching.
It's basically the end of the 996 lifespan is the 997.2,
Right.
which is what I think is so cool.
Right. So, and the way they alternate between what they do with the .1s and .2s is really very clever. How they roll different things out. But anyway, I started looking at it. It was $1.25, and I kind of dawdled. Then it was $1.50. Then it was $1.75. I'm like, what is going on? This is like during the pandemic.
Right.
And before I know it, they're asking more than $200 for a car that I was like thinking about at $1.25. And that's what kind of sent me, you know what? For six figures, I could get a car that's almost as fast and a lot more unique than this. And so that started the process of, I found a car with 300,000 miles. It had previously been hit.
Was this a California car? Was this the car that you actually? I think I saw you in L.A. and you were on your way.
No, I ended up not passing on all the California cars. This was, I want to say,
it wasn't from the Beverly Hills Car Club.
No, it was not.
Prestigious
it was from,
institution.
And I saw a lot of ratty cars there. And by the way, you look at a bunch of cars, you really kind of get a feel for what cars have and like what buttons you have to check. Oh, the button that's underneath the dash that adjusts which mirror you're adjusting. So this car, 300,000 miles, the front end was hit, so it had a bunch of rust on the inside. The paint looked great. The interior looked great.
Where was it?
It was in Connecticut. It had same owner for 20 years, wrong doors, wrong mirrors, wrong steering wheel.
How much did you pay for this car?
I want to say about $48,000, something like that.
And that's on top of the 150 or so.
No,
that was the 997 too, right? Which you
the total price.
This car I paid for, let's call it $50 by the time it tax and shipping, and then the hardware and software and labor was just about $100.
And what year
to
is it?
upgrade
What
this?
year is
This
it?
is an '87 sunroof delete rear wiper lagoon green metallic.
All right, so you're at $50,000 in this. You pay the $10,000 deposit, and then you ship it down to Austin.
Right, down to Austin, Texas.
And this is 2021.
No, the deposit is 2020, late 21.
Okay.
So I'm supposed to be up in the queue. Maybe it was early 22, and I'm supposed to be up in the queue early 2023. And then I actually was having fun driving this car around as a gasoline. The first thing I had to do, one of the fuel injectors
You don't
was
say.
spinning.
You really enjoyed driving around a Porsche.
So let me point out for people who think Porsches from the 80s are Porsches of today. So yeah, it weighed 2,500 pounds, but it's 200 horsepower, and I would get smoked if I would race a Sentra at a red light. These are slow.
They're momentum cars.
Beautiful cars.
They reward good driving.
There's no doubt about it. The steering in that car continues to astonish me. How great it is! All right, at 5 miles an hour, you're using.
So if you loved it, Barry, then why change it? And this is really
it needed a lot of stuff.
Affection. If you loved it so much when you're driving it, why would you put an electric motor?
Well, hang on a second. Let's point out that he already had bought one 80s Porsche
and kept it. My plan was not to accumulate a bunch of 911s, but the M491 Cabrio. Which, by the way, it's always amazing when I have this fantastic detailer / wrap shop.
I got to get to that guy.
That first of all, they compounded the M491, which is just
tell me what town is the detailer in?
Locust Valley.
All right, I got it.
And so the paint kind of came to life. It looked terrible, and so I didn't have to repaint that. They steam cleaned the leather with blue piping, blue above the belt line, and suddenly this M491 911 Cabrio that I think I was into for like $65,000 is
all right. So
it's $125,000 or $140,000.
We get it.
Today.
You get your dream. You get your dream cab, and that stays
EV.
gas.
So
this new $300,000 '87 car,
300,000 mile, $50,000 car.
You ship it down to Austin. I want to get to the
before I ship it down to Austin, I replace the brake lines. I have the steering serviced. And what comes back is, hey, you're going to need a new clutch on this. The engine's going to need an overhaul. If you want to keep this car the way it is, I know you paid $50,000 for it, but you really need another $20,000-$30,000 worth of work.
So you're going to have to do it anyway.
Would have been less than
the
electric.
Let's cut it in half. Let's say it needed $15,000 to $20,000 worth of work. No one's buying a 300,000-mile 911 and it's going to pour 10. Because if the estimate's 10 to 15, in reality you're 20, 25. You have to always build in a buffer on estimates. So this is a car that was going to get used for parts. No one was going to put the money in.
So you send it down to Austin.
So before I do that, I clean. I really do a compound and color correction on the paint.
We're never going to get to Austin, Hannah.
I put stripes on it. I put the Carrera on the side. Then I send it down to Austin, June 2023.
And June 2023, and you just got it back basically a year later. It took a year.
Beginning of end of July 2024.
And how happy were you with Moment Motors in terms of their communication?
Communication is fantastic. The guys over there are amazing.
They're sending you pictures the whole time.
First of all, you get a private website where they're constantly updating the site. Things every time they do something, they're telling you about it. Every time they so they're the ones that said, hey, this repair that was done on the rust in the front, this is where a couple $100 of battery is going to go. We don't think this is. What's this going to cost? A couple $1,000. All right, so do that, and then after
you had to replace the whole floor pan, basically,
in the front, right? Yeah. So, no. By the way, I have no spare tire, and I'm surprised I can't. So it's a year. I'm getting regular updates, and it's like I was kind of hoping to have it back by May or June, and lots of little things. So. Originally, Felton Motors is the company that makes all the software and adapts the Tesla engine, and they recreate the 5-gauge traditional Porsche set of dials that you see. They're modern and updated. Instead of having a tach, I have kilowatt consumption. Instead of having a gas gauge, I have here's how much charge you have. It's funny. It's the same thing, but they're all different. You kind of have to. I'm used to just kind of glancing down at the tach, and usually I have a sense of my speed in those cars.
What was the weight increase?
It went from 2,500 to a little over 2,800. So you gained about 3.25 in pounds, but you go from 215 to almost 400 horsepower. You're about 400. You're 340 until you hit the sport button, and then you're 395 in horsepower, something like that.
So you did, though. I know you overhauled the suspension.
You had to because it was sitting a little low, and so it's funny. When I first got the Cabrio, it had a race suspension, and you felt every bump. You felt the dotted lines on the road. Standard is pretty cushy. Believe it or not, those 80s era Porsches were semi-luxury cars. They're very comfortable. This is now halfway between stock and what that race car.
But I'm just trying to get to all the work you had done.
The suspension isn't bad. You put suspension. That's $2,000. The new tires were $2,000. The floor pan was $4,000.
And then
steering was, all that stuff was when I first got the car. I put about $5,000 into. Let's check the brakes. Let's see if we need to replace the brake lines. Let's look at all the light bulbs that needed to be replaced, all the fuses. My guys went through it, and for
brakes
about
are regen brakes.
So once you get the car back and you start learning how to drive it. So first, I don't have a pure EV. My other electrics are hybrid. I have my wife's Panamera 4S is a hybrid. So the regen is really, you don't feel it very much. This is set as mild regen that you can adjust.
Can or cannot?
Cannot.
Yeah.
And, it can be adjusted through software, but it's not like a little switch on the dashboard. You can't
go into your
I can't adjust it the way you can on a Tesla or a Hyundai Ioniq 5. But it's a little weird because when you take your foot off the accelerator, you continue to coast. You touch the brake pedal, and it kind of doesn't do a whole lot. For 10, 20, 30% of the travel, it's like, what's going on here? It's not until you get to 35, 40% down that the calipers kick in. So if you want to stop, you really got to mash on the brakes. That was a little bit of a learning experience. I had the car out on Saturday. It had just drizzled. And I learned if you're going to stomp on the accelerator, make sure the tires are facing forward because I'm at the three-way intersection. It's early in the morning. No one's around. And I don't even put it to the carpet. I just kind of stomp on it a little bit. And the next thing I know, the tail is passing me on the right.
Wow.
And, you just flick your wrist to the right and you catch it and kind of regain control. But it's like, okay, a little learning lesson there. I mentioned the steering is very precise, over 10 miles an hour. It's really, Hannah, you have a lot of experience with those older 911s.
Sure.
That steering is surprisingly good for a car
It's
from
great.
that era, right?
It's
like
so fun.
It's so, like, oh my,
Yeah.
I can't believe how precise and
It's
how
just
quick
fun.
to react
you
it
just
is.
set the steering wheel and go. Yeah.
But here's kind of what I learned. It corners relatively flat. There's a little lean in, but not a lot. You've gone from, I don't know, 65-35 to closer to 50-50, and you've lowered the center of gravity because of the batteries and where the motor is on the rear axle. But when you step on the accelerator, the mass shifts back on the rear wheels. I wouldn't describe it as floaty. Those cars have a little bit of understeer naturally. Or at least that's how this car feels to me. I don't know if the Cabrio does.
Talk to us about the range and the charging time.
So my wife's Panamera charger is the exact same charger, and I insisted on charging in the same place on the front left fender where the gas fill is.
Nice.
It's a nod to nostalgia.
First of all, anytime you flip that open and show people, their heads, they just explode. But second, it takes almost no time at all to charge. I use
What is that, 5 hours?
I don't know. I don't even pay attention. When it's by the way, when the motor came to Texas, they ran a set of oil cooling for the motor, and maybe because it was in Texas, it's so hot, they decided to add a second set. Didn't charge me for that, but so it's got twice the amount of cooling. Hopefully we avoid that Tesla bursting into fire sort of thing.
What's the driving range?
So 2.25 if you're driving, reasonably. If you're a hooligan, it's probably half of that, $1.50, something like that. I mean, I haven't even gotten down to 50%, of battery charge yet. I take it down to, 65, 60.
You haven't had much time with this car yet.
Yeah, the first few weeks I had a hard time getting in and out of it. Now I'm much more mobile and I'm getting in and out of the car. So I've spent this weekend and last weekend kind of putting it through its paces. And first of all, it's weird how quiet it is on the road. I haven't taken it on the highway yet, but I've been on 50-mile-an-hour roads. You get to 80 super quick. Like, I haven't tested 0 to 60, but some guy in an M850i was messing around with me on the road yesterday, and I'm like, see ya. Mm-hmm. It's always funny to, like, I wish I could see this guy's face. And my rear license plate is EV911, so anyone who's paying attention will figure this out.
So my two questions are, how much, assuming that you didn't have to do the other work that you would have had to do anyway, how much did the conversion cost when all is said and done?
I'm going to tell you, by the time you're done with everything, and anytime you are dealing, listen, I have a bunch of old cars, right? Yeah. Anytime you're dealing with a car from the 60s, 70s, 80s, if it's not this, it's that. It always is going to require something.
Right.
So whether that's 10, 20, 30 grand, it's going to cost you something. The donor car is going to cost you something. Assume you're choosing between this or a new 911. That's pretty much how it prices out.
And how much and how do you feel about this car next to the M491 cab?
So the beauty of the
gas car,
the beauty of that is the car. Like, when I was growing up, I'm a little older than you. When I was growing up, that was the poster half the guys had on the wall.
For me too, the whale tail and everything.
That's right. Yeah. And in fact, I vividly recall an episode of Seinfeld. That's the poster on his wall of the coupe. Only I'm going to assume that's a 930, not an M491.
Yeah.
It's a real turbo. But that car is, I remember the ad campaign, Kills Bugs Fast, came from Porsche. And it was just, again, I'm not a crazy Porsche guy. I don't think of this as blasphemy. This is a car I rescued that was going to the parts bin. So I don't feel like there's any blaspheme here. And by the way, I just rescued another car that, needed rescuing and was restored back to literally original factory stock. So I have a little cred amongst the local 911 crews. All right, he's okay. He saved that other car. So it's not like...
I'm just wondering if you like one better. Like, do you or are they two totally separate things?
So different. Yeah. So if you want to know what it's like to experience a truly analog car from the 90s that was well built and in its day was one of the faster cars on the road, faster, not fastest, the 911 is a blast. An 80s era 911. They look the part. You don't realize, most people don't realize, new 911s are like twice the size of the old ones. If you go out and buy a Cayman or a Boxster, which is the convertible version, they're the size of the 80s era 911s. That's how relatively small these are. They're small, they're nimble, they handle great. They're just fun cars.
Right.
By the way, anywhere I take the M491, somebody always stops me and says something.
I would just say, from my observation of this conversation, you like the M491 better because you're talking about that far more.
Well, he just asked about it.
Yeah. Well, he said, which do you like? He kind of said, which.
I mean, I've had that car for 2 years, and I feel like I'm barely 2 weeks into this car.
Yes.
And I just took it to a place in Port Washington to talk about. In fact, now that it's funny you're here, one of Magnus's cars inspired me. I took this to an interior shop because I'm going to go even more retro with this. I'm going to add a tartan plaid to the seat inserts and along the and I need the carpets need to be replaced. That's right. The sort of bluish, whitish, that color, if you look up Lagoon Green Metallic, it's really a light blue.
I see it on your blog. I'm currently looking at it right now.
It's tough to find
beautiful.
a tartan that matches it. And I thought those stripes were fun, and I thought the Carrera script, I really wanted to personalize it. You have
Love it.
I'm just looking, just for the listeners, Barry's blog, which is called The Big Picture, the URL is ritholtz.com. So you can see this. Yes. You can see all of this. I just want to say that
11th.
if something happens, Barry, where I make it into your will and I can only have one of these cars, I just think I want the M491.
Yeah.
And then
it's a very different experience. Well, by the way,
but I want to come to your house. I want to come to your house and drive this thing.
You have no idea how much, how grateful, how much I appreciate the fact that I bought a internal combustion engine 911 thinking I would convert it, ended up restoring it, but he had a roll bar, so all right, when you roll over, at least you're only the top of your head gets cut off. You don't just. And then there's the Aston.
You basically fell into a great investment with the M491.
By accident, by total accident. I thought it would be my wife's summer car, and she's like, "No, I like the Panamera better." Okay, and then I already had put the deposit down, so I had to find another car. Yeah. And this is just a totally different animal. And the ability to have both of these and to do a compare and contrast, if you click this, you'll see they're both side by side. Scroll down. Do I have a picture of both?
Yes.
So that is the picture of...
so gorgeous, dude.
So you could see the 88. And by the way, it looks better than that. The paint is better today. The interior is better today. But the ability to say, all right, what an incredible luxury. I can't begin to mention how this guy who's not a 911 mutant, not a freak about it, suddenly ends up with two spectacular 911s.
Let me ask you this. If somebody offered you $150,000 for it right now, would you sell it?
For the Cabrio?
No.
For the Carrera.
EV. No, that's a break even. Why on earth would I do that? Are you kidding me? You're going to have to...
I kind of thought you might say yes.
No, absolutely not.
That's not only I said that number.
First of all, it's 2+ years. That's the tartan I'm thinking
Yeah, if you scroll down, Hannah, you can see the tartan choices.
I saw it. Very
so
cool.
not only did it take 2 years, I'm just beginning to learn it. I'm kind of getting a feel for it.
Okay, so you're actually interested. This isn't...
No. This is...
Do you have the same Fuchsfelgen? Do you have the same wheels?
Yeah,
on
but
both
on
cars?
both of those are the wheels that are on each of those cars. Of course, I have those.
I love it.
16-inch. I will tell you, the Cabrio has much fatter rubber on that, and I looked into replacing the. I mean, those are brand new Contis on the electric, but I'm like, this car could really use some fatter rubber, and actually, the rubber isn't the weakest link in that. I want to say the brakes are probably the weakest link. I drive that car very But every time I get a new car, I drive it defensively until I really learn its limits. This thing is just, and we're going to see this problem in EVs and Ford Lightnings, and one of my workmates just got a new Rivian SUV. He's a big car guy also, Jay, in my office, and he's like, this thing is so giant and so heavy and so fast, it's stunning. And I think we need to put carbon brakes on everything, because when you have a 65, these are 3 and 4 ton vehicles with 800 horsepower. People are going to die.
Yeah, that's why the Corvette E-Ray has carbon brakes for that reason, because all right, that's all we have time for on that. We have to get to.
Thank you, Barry.
My pleasure.
Thanks for sharing.
When
with
you
us.
come out, Hannah, I will bring.
I'd love to drive it.
Whichever one you want to, or both. If you come out to the burbs, you can work your way through the whole fleet.
Barry, thank you so much for that. We're going to cover a couple of other topics here, but I'm so glad I ran into you today and that you got this project complete, because we've been hearing about it for a long time. I'm excited to see.
Bring the Vanquish and we'll swap.
Fine. Fair. Love it.
Barry Ritholtz, you can check out his blog again at ritholtz.com, The Big Picture, and definitely listen to Masters in Business. I listen to it every time a new episode comes out. All right, I want to talk about a couple of other, I don't think lower end is right for the Mercedes.
Less expensive.
The Volvo story we don't really need to say much about, right? The fact that
Volvo has scaled back their EV target.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see a lot more car makers doing this. We've already seen a few do it.
We've seen pretty much every automaker do it, from Volkswagen to General Motors to Stellantis to Mercedes to Ford.
Yep.
Volvo is simply the latest in a long list.
And by the way, I don't think it's really a surprise, and I don't think it means that we're not headed still towards an EV future.
They all say it's still going to happen. Yeah. It's just a little bit more fluid and not as quickly.
I mean, it's a huge ship. You can't turn this thing around.
No, I mean, that's part of it's like, how fast can you pivot?
And by the way, we don't really need to cover it, but the Volkswagen story that's unfolding in Germany is insane.
Fill me in on that.
They are going to, for the first time in their 87-year history, close, or at least Oliver Blume wants to, close a German factory. This is so important in a country where I think at least 400,000 Germans are employed by Volkswagen or one of the brands that Volkswagen owns. And of course, in Germany, they have a different kind of ownership system where the union occupies half of the supervisory board. So the workers have a real say in what happens to the business. And Volkswagen has had a string of CEOs who have had trouble dealing with this system and these unions. You know, Herbert Diess was the last one to essentially get thrown out by the unions not wanting him to make big changes. Blume came in, and the honeymoon is over there, because he's talking about shutting down businesses in Germany. This is at a time when Chinese competitors are coming in and just dunking on them in terms of affordable, quality electric vehicles. And it ripples into politics in a way that basically a far right-wing party, the Alternative for Deutschland, has won the elections of Thüringen, one of the German states, beating out all other comers, and it's coming in second in a lot of other states. So this sort of economic breakdown, is leading to an economic breakdown. Inflation and low-cost competition from China is destroying the German economy, and that is pushing them to extremes in terms of politics on the right and really on the left. I don't want to get into it because it's a car podcast, but I highly recommend
looking into it. That's really fascinating. I mean, it's very cool to have your perspective on that as someone who lived in Germany and is very close to that.
I mean, such a deep story. Out of Germany comes a car that I have fallen in love with, and I'm really shocked too, frankly. We're talking about the Mercedes CLE, and the 450 is the one that both of us have driven now.
Yes.
I'll preface
You're
this.
rabid.
I'll preface this by saying that a couple weeks ago, I had the Mercedes AMG SL63, which is essentially like the big version of it, right?
Yes.
That has a twin-turbo V8 and a $200,000 price tag, and I really didn't like it at all. I thought I didn't like the way it looked because I had to compare it to the old AMG GTS, which is the most beautiful car Mercedes has built in, decades, and is dead now. I didn't like the way it felt. It wasn't super comfortable. The suspension was bouncy. I didn't like the motor. Even though it was a V8, it didn't really sound that great. And it was super laggy. At least it felt like that to me. I'm not a pro, but...
You're talking about the AMG SL63.
Yes.
From Mercedes.
Yes.
Really?
I really wasn't into it.
I'm shocked.
I spent a week driving it, and
I drove it in 2022. I think that's
no. This is brand new. This one is just this is a new version of that. So
okay,
it's a 4-seater. It's a even though it's a 2-door.
The one I drove was a 4-seater. The SL,
and it's an all-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Oh well, I guess you got a much earlier look than I did.
Well, that's when it came out, but I remember thinking. Obviously, I didn't drive it last week, but I don't remember thinking any of those things. Obviously, it's curvier and heavier than the preceding SLs.
You know what? A lot of people really liked it. I think the straight pipes, Yuri and Jacob, they liked it. I believe they drove the hardtop version, which is like the new AMG GT.
Sure.
But it's the same car as the SL63 Roadster, except for it has a hardtop. I just thought, you know what? For $200,000, I don't want something that doesn't sound amazing. I don't want something that has bouncy sort of luxury suspension. Even though it is a luxury vehicle, I want it to be more precise. I don't want something that's laggy. I want something that's got instant acceleration, very responsive.
Does the CLE have those?
The CLE. So the CLE is obviously much cheaper. You can get into it for $70,000,
and a little bit more bland.
And
looking.
I think it's better looking. So
really?
And I don't love the new Mercedes design language. They look like a horizontally placed convex banana. All those cars look like banana cars.
Kind of
but I think the CLE is really good looking. Now, that could be, I didn't just fall out of a coconut tree, as Kamala says. I exist in the context of all in which I live and what came before me. But maybe because I spent time with the AMG SL63, now I'm more used to that design language, and now I can appreciate it. But I think the CLE looks better. A lot better. It could also be because the one I have is in this beautiful red. It's called Patagonia Red Metallic. It's actually called Manufaktur Patagonia Red Metallic. By the way, that's a German word that just translates into factory, and Mercedes and Porsche both use it as like a high margin, like
exclusive
optional
manufacturer is Porsche's.
I know, but exclusive factory? I mean,
exclusive manufacturer, which is German for exclusive manufacturer.
Yes. Anyway, the color's beautiful, but I feel like the responsiveness is so much better, even though it only has an inline 6, but it's got a mild hybrid, 48-volt mild hybrid system. The sound is much better, even though the sound is fake.
I was just going to say, how can you say that, Matt? How can you?
I know it sounds horrible.
I'm literally looking at this car. This is the car last week that I literally walked past in the parking garage looking for my car, quote unquote, for the week. And it was this, and I walked past it. It's so bland.
What color is yours?
It was blue. I think it was manufacturer blue. It's a fine car. It's fine. The perfect word for it is mild. It's mild.
I mean, this is an example of where two people can have very different opinions. For me, I think it's great looking. I think the seats are so comfortable, and I think the interior is so elegantly laid out. It has everything you need and nothing you don't. Normally, I would hate a car that only has a screen and no buttons, but this, for some reason, works. The new MBUX system is amazing.
But that's every Mercedes.
I like the steering wheel. Nobody else likes the steering wheel with the touch controls.
The flat bottom.
The touch controls.
So you're telling me that you enjoyed adjusting the volume, dragging your thumb.
I will
on
say,
the touch.
I haven't really listened to music on the stereo because I like the fake engine noise so much.
Oh no, Matt.
Oh God, I feel bad. I'm gonna regret saying it.
I feel like this no sugar thing is not good for.
I haven't had any sugar since Sunday.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is a bad car. It's a fine car. I'm just shocked that you're like obsessed with it.
Well,
it's a fine entry level
I just think it's so
car.
so much fun to drive. I like these big GT coupes or coupe. By the way, you should
too.
email us at hotpursuit@bloomberg.net and tell me if it's coupe or coupe. Is it coupe or coupe?
If you walk around saying coupe in the U.S., you're going to look like an idiot.
Okay, that's fair. The thing is pretty heavy, right? It's over 4,000 pounds, but it has 375 horsepower.
0 to 60 in over 6 seconds.
No.
Slow.
No. That's you're looking at the 300. This is the 450 is 0 to 60 in I think 4.2 seconds.
Not quick.
No, but it's not a sports car. It's like a luxury GT. And so for me, look, I'm driving in on the Sawmill to the Henry Hudson at 5 o'clock in the morning. There's like no place for cops to hide. So you can do super legal speeds pretty much the whole way. And it's a great car for that commute. I mean, super comfy seats. By the way, I'm 6'3" and all leg. I don't fit in almost any car unless the seat's all the way back. This is one of the few cars that I could actually have to move the seat forward to ride.
I agree. Very spacious
love
interior. Very spacious.
And the motor, I'm as shocked as you are. I'm a total diehard V8 lover. This thing is an inline 6, and therein lies my one issue with it. So basically, the way it's configured, I'm testing it for $80,000. For $80,000, you could also buy a BMW M4, which is much more of a weapon, right?
Yes.
But then again, this is a car. Maybe you don't want a weapon. Maybe you just want to commute from.
Like a very nice car, like very mild, nice.
All right.
Well,
I like it.
I do think the starting price for the inline 4, which is like 63, I think.
The 300, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, it's an entry level. It's a mass luxury. It's a mass produced.
I don't know. Inline 4, I feel like you've kind of given up on life at that point.
How can you say that? There's not a big difference between this mild hybrid 6 and an inline.
Dude, I think the inline 6 is an amazing engine configuration. It's one of the great engine configurations. An inline 4, unless it's an Alfa Romeo 4C, I like the inline 4 and the BMW 530, I guess. But
I'm just so surprised.
Just quickly tell me what you're doing next week. I'll tell you what I'm doing next week, and then we'll wrap.
On Saturday, I am traveling to Luxembourg to drive the Dolce Cilindri, the 12-cylinder Ferrari.
Oh my goodness! You're going to Luxembourg to drive a Ferrari?
Yes.
You live the life.
Yeah, I know. I'm
blessed.
I'm blessed. No, I hate that term.
By the gods.
I'm really happy to go. It should be fun. I hope that I can get enough information to help everyone else learn whether they should buy it. And so that's what I'm doing on Saturday.
Wow, that's amazing.
What are you doing?
Well, next week I'm going to a Singer presentation. Okay. I don't even know what it is, but Singer is going to be here in New York City in Greenwich Village, and I have never seen a Singer in real life. So
what are they presenting?
The Turbocharged Tour is what it's called.
Okay.
So it's going to essentially be Barry's car, Barry's M491, but with a turbocharged motor. Amazing. And obviously highly modified. I'm super excited to see a Singer for the first time. Obviously, a car I will never probably.
You don't know?
That's true. I could become a Bitcoin billionaire.
There's a guy out here on the West Coast that just won the biggest Powerball payout, I believe, who's been buying cars lately.
He should get a Singer.
That could be you.
So I'm excited to see that here in New York City. There's a Ducati meetup that I'm excited for here. And then Indian has come out with an all-new Scout. I know this is a cars podcast, but Indian...
I love the Scout.
It's a great... it's like such a great platform for Indian.
Yes.
And I'm more of a Chief guy.
Well, yes, you are.
But I'm excited to drive this new Scout, and I'm going to get one to test out for a week. So...
That's awesome.
I'm looking very much forward.
Be really fun.
The dozens of listeners that we have should definitely email us. We've been getting starting some really cool conversations. So hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. Me and Hannah right back, usually straight away. And
and we've got some cool guests coming up. We've got Chris Bodie, the trumpeter, who's really extremely cool, world-renowned, has toured with everybody, including Frank Sinatra. He's actually a big car guy, and he lives many places, but he's got a place at Thermal Track. And so we're going to talk to him about his life in cars. He's got some other cool cars on order. So that'll be really fun. And
having a house at Thermal would be, you might know a few people.
I want
but
to talk to him about that.
I think it's such a cool idea, and I've never been to a track where people have houses and garage set up. And so, we talked to Lake Bell. Her dad set up, I think, the New Jersey Motorsports Park like that, kind of. Or he set up VIR, right?
Yeah.
Which is cool. I should say, I also have Ali Javedan from Range Energy lined up. I don't know when, but I talked to his people today on the actual telephone. And this guy has been he started, I think, his first big job at Tesla, but he's been all over the place, and he knows everything about suspension, is a huge Porsche guy, so he'll be coming on at some point. And then are you going to say the CEO of...
Yes, Chris Brownridge, the new CEO of Rolls-Royce, will be coming on, and we will have a lot of fun talking with him about all of his new plans. He's following in big footsteps from Mr. Torsten Muller-Otvos, who was there for, I think, 13 years. So Chris has got his work cut out for him. But
I'll never forget the first time I drove a Rolls-Royce Ghost with Torsten.
How did that go?
It's my all-time favorite car. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's my number
amazing.
one.
Wow.
The old one, the Ghost 2 from the 2010s. All right. Cool. That's all for us this week. We'll be back same time, same place next week. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott. And this is Bloomberg.